Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of The Boys Presents Diabolical. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I should also first note that I do know it is me getting to this pretty much 2 months later, but I figure now's kind of the best time to also jump into this, considering season 3 of The Boys is literally right around the corner. So let's kind of jump into that. Obviously, the very old school kind of Tom and Jerry / Looney Tunes aesthetic they've kind of got going, where it's just like, oh, vault tunes and everything, and just like, right, the entire episode's like expressive sounds like and gasp and but no actual dialogue. So I was wondering whether or not, I don't think it is, but I was curious, like, could Laser Baby still be the Laser Baby from season 1? But I'm like, I don't think so, because I obviously it doesn't get covered too much, but we have seen, and other things have recently shown, that people can get similar abilities. Maybe they just like look a little differently. Like the whole laser beam eyes things doesn't seem like that's too much of a stretch that other people can get it too. So I guess it's just, abilities are going to be copied. They're not going to be like all like 100%. I mean, because some of the abilities end up bleeding over anyway. Being like, oh, like super strong and like being somewhat resistant to being potentially stabbed or shot in some of the supers cases. But nevertheless, I thought this whole thing was interesting. Obviously, the baby's getting tested to see whether or not they the trial go by, and the guy, who's apparently the character's name is Simon, ends up trying to, this is the last day of testing for this baby, but it's always been a very hit and miss, mainly miss situation with the baby's laser eyes. We did get kind of sprinkled in other test babies. One was a freeze baby, one was like kind of a poisonous gas baby, and another one seemed like a porcupine baby. So at least from what we saw of like the testers, the different afflictions that they were dealing with in the aftermath of the respective rooms they ended up flying out of. But the baby can't control the laser beam, so it's like, was it sneezing, coughing, and I guess, and hiccuping are what ends up causing the baby to use their abilities. So it's like, oh, laser baby's day out. So he tries to leave with the baby when he files his reports, and like the baby needs to be terminated. But it's kind of jacked up to know, like, oh, does Vought actually do that when the baby's a failure? Because we haven't really tackled that in the show itself, so that begs the question. So, but it's like, yeah, babies that can be adopted, because I guess it makes sense, because who wants to take, because I don't know if they haven't really covered adoption in The Boys yet, so it's interesting to see this. Once again, it's like, it's a hyperbolized like cartoon, but it makes you wonder, would it still fit in the canon of like, do they do that? Do they test babies out, which ones are adoptable? Because if the baby can have a little bit more control over their ability, it's like, cool, we don't have to worry about a lawsuit situation where like, oh, you adopt this baby and the baby ends up killing you. So there's probably like, not really, you really might not have to worry about that necessarily. So maybe that's what the whole testing is for, because they don't want to end up with large level lawsuits. But it's like, yeah, I guess it's like you don't really want to keep around any failed experiments and stuff like that, because it could end up being an issue if the baby grows up. It could be a problem. Maybe that's why. But yeah, the baby, that laser baby, is going to be terminated, and Simon wants to protect the baby, because you see all these different like adoptions and stuff like that. Photos, and Simon, I guess, wanted to like, would you seem like a researcher, like, would they even let you do that? Can you do that? Like, is that what happens? Do those babies get adopted? I figured it'd be just regular families, but can the researchers just like, and the scientists just adopt the babies without issue? That just seemed weird. I mean, maybe you can throw your hat in the ring for that. Once again, it's a cartoon, I'm thinking too much about it, but still, that's where my mind goes. Obviously, the messed up nature of just like, the nature of like everything going down, of like the baby getting out and the poor guard getting blasted through the chest, people trying to get in the baby's way, the team sent to terminate it, the baby ends up killing them all. One of my favorite probably depths is probably like the one where the guy had the fire extinguisher, the baby ended up lasering off his arms, it fell, lit him on fire, and then very, old school cartoonish, he turns into ash and disintegrates. That one's pretty brutal. The super brain one was pretty gnarly, where it's like the top of his head got cut off and his brain slipped out, and he's still alive long enough to like try and grab the piece of his brain to shove it to the top of his skull, and then drools from his mouth and dies. I was like, that's super fucked up. The horse situation where like the piranhas ended up eating the horse, which I love that it's like, oh, there's a time where the deep is like, oh yeah, piranhas need love too. Which, there is a photo of the Seven, which I think shows you canonically where this is supposed to take place. Not saying it is canon, but canonically speaking, the Seven include Starlight, Maeve, Black Noir, A-Train, and Homelander. So I guess by this point, Transparent's already dead and the Deep is already out of the Seven. So I think that gives you a little insight into the continuity. I also appreciate that it's like, oh, here's a picture of Homelander being like, hey, adopt. And it's like, there's layers to that because he is the man baby that he is, the whole obsession with milk. And also the fact is the whole thing with him and Ryan. So it's just, there's layers to that. But, I do like, going back to the super brain situation, I do like, once again, your classic, like, well, because it's also very classic, like, Tom and Jerry-esque, too, where it's just like, oh, like, Tom and Jerry have to protect a baby that's, like, going through all of this dangerous stuff. Like, there are literal episodes based around that, and I'm sure that's what this is kind of an homage to and stuff like that. Like, once again, old school cartoons in that regard, but I thought it was interesting that obviously in the end, the baby activates its power when it wants to protect Simon because it cares about it. And it's just like, it does it on purpose. And then like everyone's down there ready to kill the baby. And Simon kind of does this thing. He points and the baby lasers everyone. So I'm like, oh, streets are riddled with blood. I don't know how Vought sweeps this under the rug. Once again, it's a cartoon. So it's like, it's nonsensical. But I think it's kind of interesting. Like, oh, you get to just walk away with the baby, Simon. I don't think Vought would be too happy about that. But you're just like, oh, you stroll off into the sunset, and I even love the very Porky Pig element of that's all, boys. So I thought that was pretty neat, but just kind of an interesting first episode. Once again, like I was just surprised, like there was no dialogue, but it's still like a very interesting story. Once again, just thinking about the aftermath of like, yeah, you wouldn't be able to just walk away from that. And of course, there'd be long-term implications for it, but it's nice to know that obviously the show doesn't hold back live action wise. You definitely don't have to hold back animation wise with just the blown out chest, especially the final shot where the guy was trying to shoot him and he ended up the baby ended up lasering him in the face, and you get that like other side of his skull, like looking inside of where the hole is. That was pretty dope. The guy getting his nose bitten off because he was laughing at Simon. He's like, oh, you got a piranha on your butt, and then like the piranha like latched onto the guy's nose and ripped it off. I was like, oh, that one like in a disturbing way made me chuckle. But yeah, really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.